Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Meniere's Muse podcast. My name is Heather, and I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease and vestibular migraine in 2017 and found myself craving connection with other warriors, and found the more warriors I met, the more inspired I was, and that my hope for healing came to life. I created this podcast to share stories of vestibular warriors, regardless of their diagnosis or where they are on their journey, to give hope so no one feels alone. If this podcast may benefit you or someone in your life, please forward this to them and make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you know someone with an inspiring story, please find my contact information below. We all have a story. Let yours inspire others. This is part 2 of a 2-part series where today's guest, Daniela, shares her story. If you haven't listened to part 1, you may want to start there first. We deal with so many different emotions when experiencing vestibular symptoms, when we're misdiagnosed, mistreated by the medical system, even comparing our symptoms, treatments, and how we deal with each obstacle as it's introduced into our lives. Our reactions to the symptoms may vary, be that through guilt, self-pity, anger, feeling like a burden, sadness, or so many other emotions we all deal with. And yes, we all deal with them very differently. Daniela shares genuinely how her emotions and behavior changed when the symptoms arrived in her life, and how she's recovering as a better person. Her story is so relatable, and I hope you find that too. Daniela was working in academia as a college professor when her first bothersome symptom of visual disturbances began. From there, the symptoms only increased in intensity, and over time, she was finally diagnosed with PPPD, persistent postural perceptual dizziness, neurovascular dizziness caused by jugular compression, and thoracic outlet syndrome, along with third window syndrome from cochlear-facial nerve canal dehiscence. So many things changed in her life, but I'll save all the details for her to share with you in this part 2 in a 2-part series. Please welcome Daniela. So what has living with a vestibular disorder taught you about yourself?
Oh, the main lesson, I would say, or the first, that was the hardest lesson, is that I am not good a person as I hoped I was going to be. And let me explain that. When I got very dizzy, like I always had this image of myself that like if I were to go through anything that would be hard health-wise, that I would be stoic, altruistic, and that I would keep going for my family, and that I wouldn't complain, I wouldn't burden others, and I wouldn't be all like, why me? But then when I got dizzy, and it was like 19 months of like relentless dizziness with no hope of improving, I was like, I want to die, I want to kill myself, and why me? And I became really selfish. And to the point that like I could, it's not like I was loving my family less, but that love got numb. That's a horrible thing to say. But it's like, because my love for my family is always bigger than my love for myself or for anything else.
Right.
It drives my life. But like, it was a point where like, it became numb. I couldn't feel love. I could only feel self-pity and anger. I was so angry. And that made me, I complained all the time. And I was a burden to like people near and far. And the only way not to be a burden was to then not talk to people. And it's horrible because like I always thought I would be a bigger person. Like you read these stories about like someone gets cancer and a terminal diagnosis and they spend their last months doing this or that. And it's like, I don't know how it would have, like different sicknesses, I think are very different. When I had my hysterectomy, I actually had a serious complication in the hospital. Like I had bleeding after the surgery and I had to stay a week instead of 2 days. And, it was scary, but like I didn't feel self-pity or anything about that. So I think different body conditions do different things to you. So I'm not saying I know what would happen to me if I had another condition, but what I can say is that dizziness and that's like the pain from TOS doesn't do that to me, but dizziness does. It goes to the core of who I am. Like it went to like, it's the brain and the heart, it just makes, it's not like, oh, my foot is hurting and it sucks and pain is horrible, but it's the foot that's there. It's like, it's everything. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking and seeing dizzy all the time. And so I do think that it taught me that, like, my limits and my shortcomings, and I'm saying this from a position of, I think, having worked on these issues.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was dizzy, I started doing therapy, like talk therapy, and I think the medication also helped with like the depression
Right.
and anxiety. But now I'm like, okay, this I learned about myself is that I'm very imperfect, and that's okay because
Yeah,
I'm only human.
that's right.
But also, I felt a lot of guilt and shame about all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no other choice other than moving on. But there's always room to then improve. So I had 19 months that I'm like, I'm not proud of the person that I was, but I am confident that I have recovered a better person. But I also know how fragile this is and how easy that better person can go away.
Yeah, that's true.
So I can't make any promises. Let's talk in a few years and see if I'm still like.
And this is like the flip side too. I know we touched on imposter syndrome a couple times, and I still struggle with that in some of my posts.
I mean, to me, like when I start feeling imposter syndrome, which I felt throughout the whole time, and it's that feeling of like, maybe I don't deserve the accommodations I have. Maybe I should work harder.
Yeah.
But then I always remind myself, I know how much easier my life was before I got dizzy. I know what it feels like to sit in front of a computer and just like, okay, you worry about what you have to write or,
Right.
or the deadline, but like, you're not also like feeling like there's like, a vice pressing on your head and a veil between you and the world and you're nauseous and everything.
Yeah.
I know how easy it was. I know how it was to like forget my body because I didn't have pain. Now, like I have either pain or tightness like all the time. So I know how it was not to have those things.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm the only person who has them, but I am because I have that memory of how my life was before.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not imposter. I know this is real, but it's hard because, when you compare with others, oh, mine is not as bad. Like I never had spinning vertigo.
Right.
I never had drop attacks. I never threw up from dizziness.
Right.
Even with like the thoracic outlet syndrome, I have a lot of symptoms, but like people in my support group are in much worse shape than I am. And so, not to mention, then you compare with all the other possible bad things that can happen to someone in the world.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, it's weird. So then I have to remind myself, like, you can't, no, it's not about comparing is not going to help anyone.
Nope.
Because it's not a competition.
No.
But I know because, I remember how it was and it was easier. So when I'm like, okay, I have some accommodations in my job
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not taking advantage of all of them, but I wish I were. I take advantage of some. But when I remember how it was, I was like, yeah, I deserve those accommodations because I know what it was not to have, not to need them.
Right.
I would rather not need them.
So you mentioned accommodations. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's a big thing in the community also about talking to your work about these symptoms. So apparently you had that conversation with someone.
Right. But I have to say that I did so from a position of safety that most people don't have. And the reason is, I think two reasons. One is that I think not all, but most universities are open-minded, especially for including people with disabilities. And the second reason is that, and I know most jobs don't have that, but as an academic, we have this thing called tenure. And so I don't know if I should explain for like the general audience, because I didn't know this before I became an academic, but
Sure.
For certain academic jobs, you can be hired as what we call a tenure track professor. That means you're on your track to tenure. And that means that after 5, 6, or 7 years, you go through this huge review of everything you've ever done, like your books and your articles and your classes and how you perform in committees and other things. And then people inside your institution and outside your institution, like I'm an architecture historian, so other architecture historians look at all of your production, and then they say, yes, you deserve tenure, or no, you don't deserve tenure.
Like your peers?
If you get tenure, Yeah.
Okay.
And if you get tenure, if
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's a very long process, it takes a year because you get like the external reviewers, you get the internal people in your institution, and then you get the higher ups like the provost and the president.
Wow.
And if it all goes through, you have your job for life.
Hmm.
I mean, not okay. If you stop showing up to work, if
Right.
you do something strange, if the university, goes bankrupt, then you don't have it for life. But as long as you keep showing up, you have your job for life. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I brought up my condition, I had tenure. I mean, I have tenure. And so I know, and legally, I mean, even if you don't have tenure, like they can't just fire because you have a disability. But I know like they can't just say, oh, we'll take away your tenure because you're dizzy.
Right.
And so that made it a lot easier. But even with that,
Mm-hmm.
I was still hesitant because, I changed jobs and I didn't know my supervisor, the head of my department, the chair of my department very well at the time. And now I know him and he's wonderful. And I know that he would have been supportive no matter what, but like I didn't, right? So that was a little bit of like a leap of faith
Mm-hmm.
that he'll take this the right way because, people cannot fire you if they have tenure, but they can punish you in other ways if they
Right.
think whatever. And so he's very supportive and he works on issues of inclusion and health, so he gets it. And there is an HR department within the university that takes care of those things that also like, you talk to someone and they write a letter. They needed like a letter from my doctor. My neurologist wrote like this long letter and all these like exams I had to, I had to prove them. You can't just like show up and say I'm dizzy.
Right.
I had to say all these tests and all these things to prove. And then they give me like an official letter saying that I have, I can have these and the other accommodation. And especially because, if you get accommodations, your coworkers don't necessarily know about any of it. Because it's private and because it might be a big place.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if people perceive that you're getting privileges or,
Right.
they don't know why, like just to give one example, when I started teaching here, they really wanted me to teach at night, like from 6 to 8 or something like this. And I was like, well, at that time, I'm exhausted and there's the darkness of the night. And so I don't function. It's like I get home, I can't even talk sometimes coherently. And so they kept asking me to do these things at night. And so I put in my accommodations. I cannot teach after a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
But, the people, either like my colleagues who teach here or even like the administrators, they're the ones who schedule us, who like put us in the schedule and find a room for our classes. They don't know all of that. So then I sometimes wonder, are they rolling their eyes at me? Oh, she's just doesn't want to put in the hours.
So they're not aware.
But right, yeah, and I do mention when it's relevant that I say, look, I have a chronic condition, I have accommodations, and I say what it is. But then, I mean, I don't know if you get that with dizziness, but the problem with dizziness is that people don't always take it seriously.
No. Oh, I have that. Yeah.
Yeah, because people like they don't understand how bad it is. Oh, you're just a little dizzy. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is me. Before I got dizzy, I had a colleague when I was in Minnesota, and she had a concussion. So she had post-concussion syndrome. And she told me that, she was having a lot of trouble with the computer and she was getting dizzy. And it's not like, I mean, I was understanding and everything, but I remember like I sent her some suggestions of like, oh, you can dictate your text and you can use voice recognition. But I think that I didn't fully understand what she felt. It's not like I didn't act like, we collaborate and I'm supportive and I offered all my help, but like,
Right.
I know in my heart of hearts that I didn't get how hard it was. I just thought, okay, she's a little dizzy. It's like having a headache, you take a Tylenol and you feel better. Then got dizzy myself and I was talking to my husband. Then he told me that he was like, wow, now I understand what dizziness is. Mm-hmm. And he said before he thought when someone says they're dizzy, he thought, well, just sit down and drink water and you're going to feel better. And I know, but I thought myself, and so I feel that sometimes when I mention it to people at work or anywhere else, that it's like, they're not getting how bad it is.
Right. That's true.
It's like, like I don't have migraines, but when people with migraines, they say, oh, I have a migraine. And someone, oh yeah, everybody has a headache. It's like, no, a migraine is not a headache.
Yeah.
So I don't have migraines, but it's like that feeling.
Oh yes. I am a migraine sufferer and I still have people that say, "Oh, yeah, I had a headache yesterday." I'm like, "Oh, if only it was a
Yeah.
headache." Yeah, it's frustrating, but I just kind of roll with it. I saw someone on Instagram today that he saw Instagram, one of the social media platforms, and he wears a sash. It's not a real manly word, sash, but it's like a sash, and it says that he has an invisible illness, so just be patient with him. He has Meniere's disease, but he doesn't specify on the sash. He just walks with the walking canes, and yeah, so he does that so people are aware of it. So without wearing a sign
Like
all the time.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Because one thing I saw a while ago was someone in an airplane. I mean, I didn't see it live. I saw like a Instagram,
Hmm.
and she had like a one of those lanyards with a sign that said "invisible disability."
Yes, there's a
Um,
there's a girl on social media. I think it's Instagram who actually she does them for different invisible disabilities, so you can wear the lanyards, and you know, I don't know how visible and if people are actually paying attention to them.
would you wear one?
I don't know. I thought about that for the hard of hearing aspect because I read lips fairly well. Well, I realized that when I couldn't read lips anymore with the masks. So that's a big one. I did wear a medical alert bracelet for a while with the Meniere's disease.
It makes me think of one thing that I feel is related to the dizziness and the TOS in that I always had like a naive trust in my body, like because I'm doing the right things,
Mm-hmm.
then the body's gonna work. And when you feel like your body betrays you, it was just really frustrating at the beginning to be misdiagnosed. And part of it, I think, I want to be fair to the medical professionals because they, at least in the US, they work in such a way that they're not given the time to be with the patient
Yes, I
or to
know.
think about the patient later because they have to fill up forms.
Mm-hmm.
And also, people have their specialties and whatever, they have their own lives. So I'm okay with that. But like, it was very damaging for me to have gone through a misdiagnosis of, I was misdiagnosed as many years.
Mm-hmm.
And what was really frustrating is that I get that part of it is like a bit of trial and error. But what was frustrating is that I kept telling the doctor, I don't have the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, for example, but I don't have hearing loss. And then he would say, well, but now Meniere's can be only vestibular. And then I would say, but I don't have spinning vertigo. Oh, but Meniere's now can have other kind of vertigo. Like he was trying to fit everything into his idea.
Right.
And then I would come to him and I would say, but what you're telling me to do is not making any difference. Like I did low sodium diet, I took diuretic. Then I would call him one day when the dizziness got super bad. And then he was like, just take more diuretic.
Oh
And,
goodness.
and then I did, and it got worse. And that's when I was like, I'm not seeing that person anymore.
Right.
And that went on for like 4 or 5 months. But what I think was, I mean, honestly, to me, that's gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it's not because it's not intentional because like he didn't know any better. I'm sure he's not a bad
But
person.
wouldn't you
But
rather,
it's the
Daniela, wouldn't you rather have someone say, I don't know, let's figure this out together, than have someone just guessing just to get you out of the office? I mean, I
exactly.
really would.
Yeah.
I wish more of them that didn't
That's
know, you know.
that's exactly what I felt is that just say you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
just be willing to try. Because then the other thing is that I find that doctors in the US are not always willing to like throw the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, which for
Right.
trial and error, that's what you have to do. But they're like, oh, you don't have X, Y, and Z, so this is not the protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of tests that could have been ordered, or even like, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go over it in too much detail. It's still, I would say, something I still have to navigate with doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just their idea of what things are and what has to be done. And I happen to be lucky that, I have one condition, PPPD, that works with the medicine. But yeah, I just wish that there would be the willingness to say, I don't know, but also the willingness to then just try
Right.
and think outside the box. The system, and I'm saying this because, I'm from Brazil, and I don't know how it is now, but growing up in Brazil, I think doctors were more flexible and creative with treatments and diagnoses.
Right.
But here in the US, there's like, fear of litigation, and B, the way that insurance works,
The little
that you
block.
have just to do, you have to do what's proven. And yeah, so and it's ridiculously lucky that then, 5 months into it, I found a neurologist who then diagnosed me. It wasn't easy because it's still, after seeing her, it still took me a full year, almost a year and a half, to get better from the dizziness. But
It's crazy.
if I hadn't found her, I would still be thinking, yeah, I have many. And so I just thought of this other thing, which is like people who have Meniere's and don't get better, they have these really invasive things, right, that kind of destroy your hearing. So then how do you differentiate between someone who has Meniere's that is not treatable and needs the injection from someone who doesn't have Meniere's? And there was someone on Instagram, I don't know if you saw her story, that like she got these injections and maybe she didn't need them.
And did she lose her hearing?
I think she did some, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the steroid injection or the other one that has a G name. But so, yeah, with Meniere's, it's hard because like you don't have really an exam that can prove or disprove it. It's all like, you can't look into the ear, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, things could have turned out a lot worse for me, I guess. Even if they don't have the time, like I get it, like you have a lot of time for appointment, then I don't know, make another appointment or send me somewhere else, just don't waste my time. You don't want to do it, just say, go see someone else.
Right.
Because they still wanted me to come back. They were like,
know.
no, you have to come back for a hearing test to see if you lost your hearing. And I was like, no.
Crazy. There's got to be some other way. Is there any place we can support you in the community, Daniela?
I feel very supported. And I was thinking today, actually, because I was thinking, you and I met because of Instagram. And I was thinking that my initial motivation to go on Instagram was more like, I need to get this out my chest and sort of do this for other dizzy academics out there. And so far, I've only met like 2 of them. But what I realized is that through Instagram, I met this whole supportive community of dizzy people that I hadn't met before because, the support groups on Facebook are just different. Yeah. Like I have support groups for third window syndrome and TOS that are great on Facebook, but the dizzy ones, I don't know, they didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm so lucky I did this because that's not what I thought I was going to get out of it, but that's the main thing. And I I've been thinking, because I haven't posted in a while because I was busy and I traveled, and I was like, I don't even care about posting anymore. It's like I met these people and it's amazing. Right. And and so I would say right now I feel really supported by the dizzy community, which is, it's wonderful. It's like this should be prescribed by doctors, like support, mutual support from others. People do other things, right? So like you have AA and you have other support groups. So
there is a vestibular.
I feel supported.
Good. There is a vestibular support group that's like online Zoom. They meet every week. So if you ever feel the urge to do that, I can give you the information. It's with Joy and Marissa. And it's really nice. It's because it's brand new. It's just now at the baby stage. But already just in the last few months, it's growing to many people. They've even, I don't know if that's Meniere's or vestibular disorders, that they started one in India also. So it's worldwide. So it's so nice. Yeah. So if you ever want that, I could always give that to you. Yes, cool.
I would like that because I think I saw some, but there was one for vestibular migraine, and I attended one of their things. They had like a lecture with a doctor, but I was like, I don't have vestibular migraine, so I can't really, But yeah, if there's another one,
nice. Absolutely. Well, Danielle, before we go on to whirlwind questions, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I feel like you said, I could talk to you for the whole day. So I think we're artificially at an end, but there's always more things.
I know it's our stories go like this, but then they branch out so much. You could just talk about them forever. I know.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, let me get my little list here. Okay. So you've heard this before, so I will just fire away. Fill in the blank. Vestibular disorders are
horrible.
They are horrible. You feel your symptoms coming on and you're trying to be brave. What do you do?
breathing.
Do you do any particular
Breathing.
kind of breathing?
Yes. So I learned one recently that, like, the first kind that I would do was what I had learned in meditation many years ago, which was you just try to pay attention to the in and out of the breath. So focus that when the air comes in, it's cold, and when it comes out of your nostrils, it's warm. And that focused me. But recently I learned another one, which is you breathe into your belly and you count to 5, like 5 counts of breathing. Then you hold for 3 and you release in 7. So you're releasing more. And that helps a lot.
Awesome. Awesome. What is one thing people usually get wrong about you?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
That's a tough one.
Okay, since I got dizzy, I would say that most people who just know me superficially, I think they just don't get how in pain I am all the time and how uncomfortable dizziness can be.
Yeah.
But besides the dizziness, I actually don't know.
Okay.
It's a hard question.
It is a hard one. What's your favorite vestibular friendly meal?
Ah, huh. One that's easy to make because I don't have food triggers, so I'm okay in that respect.
Good.
But when I'm very dizzy, I just okay. So looking for things in the fridge is very dizzy for some reason, and so something that doesn't take a long time to prepare, that's easy, and that's right in front of the fridge.
I hear you. I'm one of those. Okay, what do we have? Let's throw it all together. That's me. What's the last show that you binged and loved?
It was, oh my god, I forgot the name. Okay, I forgot the name of that show, so I can't tell. It's a show about this detective called Atticus Pond, but I can't remember the title of the show. So the show that I saw prior to that was Wednesday, which I saw with my daughter, and I loved it because, yeah, it's just very cool, but also because I saw it with her.
Yes. Yeah. I know my daughter begged me, and I'm like, I don't want to watch this. But then once I watched it, I'm like, oh, I really like this. It's really good.
Some of the best shows I watch because of her.
Right.
Like, she is the one who made me watch Stranger Things. And then several years ago, there was a series of unfortunate events, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So
Lila's wanting me to watch Stranger Things right now with her. I said, I'll have to test it out and see if you're ready.
Right. Yeah, it can be scary.
Let's see. What's your favorite novel?
My favorite novel is Brideshead Revisited, which I read a long, long time ago. First, actually, it was a series. I first saw it as a series in the 80s, so I was like a early teenager when I saw it. And it was a series from BBC, like British shows. And it had Jeremy Irons. He was really young. And it was like this British world between the wars, if I remember correctly. And these aristocrats that are kind of like dying out with the aristocracy before World War II. And this guy who's sort of like an outsider because he's from like working class, and he goes to maybe Oxford or Cambridge, and he meets someone is part of this aristocracy. So I love the series, and then many years later I read the book, and it was actually, now that I think of it, I mean, one of my favorite books of all time, but also it was the book that helped me learn English because I was like intermediate level before I read it.
Right.
And then I was like, I'm going to read this book. And then I got a dictionary. I was like, I don't know, 16. And I got a dictionary, and every page there were like 20 words I didn't know, and I stopped for every page. So it took me forever to finish the book, but by the end I was like, oh my god, I speak English.
That's awesome. I know when I emailed you about reading your book, and I'm like, every page I have to look up 2 or 3 words. I was being serious. But that's okay. I loved it. I love it. It's so interesting. I'm still making my way through it because it just it brings back so many memories. Even though I was so young, I still remember so much of being there, and even the energy. I remember being there because it was still East and West Berlin. So yeah.
But one of the things in my life that, okay, if you could go back in time and do one thing, it would be to visit Germany and the 2 sides of Germany before the wall fell down, because I wish I had seen it. And
yeah, I was in Girl Scouts, so it was I remember them lecturing us on the school bus before we went over. Make sure you don't wave. You have to keep your hands in your lap. And we were in blue jeans. So blue jeans were like a hot, just only the wealthy wore blue jeans, or something to that effect. But it was terrifying, but exhilarating and all the same. But I didn't realize really what I was visualizing until years later, what I was witnessing. So it's, yeah, I'm glad we went over there, but it was, yeah, very different world.
I have to say, I was super flattered that you found my book and that you were reading it. So thank you for that.
No. And I really didn't know if I'd be able to read it. But after I started, I'm like, wow, John, I really didn't think I would be drawn to it, but I just got sucked into it. So it's really good. And I don't know why.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing to hear, because my dream is like, I want people to read not just academics.
Yeah.
And, you have to conform to certain rules of academic writing, but I hope that I'm writing beyond that.
Oh, yes, you are. It's
nice.
really, it's really beautifully written if I can understand it and get consumed with it, and understand it even through my dictionary at my side, that's okay. It's all right. It's good. Oh, goodness. Let me see where it was. Oh, what's a movie that you could watch over and over and never tire of?
Right, so that's a movie that my daughter also introduced me to, called Coraline.
Oh my goodness, your daughter and my daughter would get together just like this.
Because so she read the book, and after she read the book, we watched the movie, and we watched, because she would watch the same movie over and over, and that was one that was like, okay, I could watch it. We probably watch it 10 times, I could still watch it. There's something about just, it's so whimsical, and there's the fantasy side, but there's also like the deep side that like really like gets to some, I don't know, dark stuff. And yeah, I don't know, everything about it is just, I love that movie.
I do too. My husband doesn't like it, but he's never really sat and watched it, because if you're not getting into it, I can see where he just thinks it's a dark movie. But if you really take a minute to be invested in the storyline, it's a great movie. I agree.
Yeah. What's scary sometimes?
Yes. I'm actually surprised. She saw it for the first time when she was 7, and like your daughter, watched it on repeat over and over and just loves it. So it's great. What is an activity that completely relaxes you?
A bath in a deep tub with very, very, very hot water and some Epsom salts. But it has to be a deep tub. So it can't be a shallow tub, otherwise it won't relax. And so I can't always have that. So since I can't always have that, then I have the Shakti mat. It's super relaxing.
I have that on my wish list.
Yeah, it's weird and painful at first, but it's like once you're in it, it's like between sleep and awakeness.
Nice.
No, wakefulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
very cool. What is your most used tool in your vestibular toolbox?
So for vestibular symptoms, I would say breathing. And if you broaden to include TOS, which is related to my dizziness, but the symptoms are pain, then I have all sorts of like balls and massage things. And there's something called a noble, and you can press your trigger points, and those are amazing.
That sounds nice.
And they're more like a tool.
Yeah. That's a tool.
I took one on the plane because, we went to France and there was the 7-hour flight. So I was just like doing this with this weird thing that has a point. And I was like, people must think it's strange, but I don't care. I need it.
That's right. If it works, don't worry. I know when I first learned about tapping, I was getting anxious about something, and I was at a light and I was tapping in my car, and I'm like, this guy in front of me is probably wondering what in the world I'm doing, but it doesn't matter. Let's see. Oh, this is the last question. What are you extremely grateful for today?
But just how much I've improved. Like, I don't take this for granted. And every single day I think about it. So today, and I mentioned like today and Thursday were days that I wasn't very dizzy. And every time that I feel not dizzy, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not dizzy. I do not take this for granted, and I feel such gratitude.
Yeah.
And then the days like Friday, I was a bit dizzier, but what happened is when I felt dizzier and I had to teach and I had these work things, but I felt like I know it's up and down and I'm gonna get better.
Right.
So then I'm still grateful because I know I'm in control now. Like the dizziness is not in control, and so that's the thing right now that I'm immediately grateful for. But I think I don't take anything for granted anymore, and so I feel I don't know, I just feel gratitude. It's like it's sunny and I'm with my husband and my daughter, and we had this trip to France, or I just I'm gonna eat some noodles later. Just like little things,
Right.
One thing that is really cool is that I grew spring onions at home for the first time, and it's totally silly, but I put instead of throwing away the roots, I put them in a pot.
Right.
2 weeks ago, and then I ate some, and I was like, I'm so happy for that. And it's like it's a little thing, but it makes
it is. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it has been so great to connect with you finally. Daniela, we could have spoken for the entire afternoon. You are such a delight. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself. I look forward to our next conversation. If you would like to connect with Daniela, please find her link to her Instagram account, Dizzy Professor, in the show notes. If you're interested in reading Daniela's book, I found it fascinating. It is called Counter-Preservation, Architectural Decay in Berlin since 1989. If you would like to reach out to me, Heather Davies, please find me at maniermuse@gmail.com or on Instagram, or feel free to leave a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/maniermuse. And don't forget, Vita's Steps to Balance is quickly approaching, May 21st through May 27th. I would love it if you join us in the first annual Flock Walk, where I'll be joining my bestie sisters and brothers from Vestibular Voices from the Smith Balance and Concussion Center. I'll include that link below if you'd like to make a pledge or join us. For more information on vestibular disorders, please visit the Vita website at www.vestibular.org. For online support group information, please see the show notes for dates and times. Thank you so much for listening. And remember to love yourself. Be open to the work. Lean on this beautiful community. And lastly, believe that healing is possible. I'll see you next week, warriors.